So in my time at the Betty Ford Children's Program, when parents or referrals would want to call, and they would have some kids that they would refer, when they had teens, we would have to just refer them to individual therapists or Alateen. And it seemed like there was such a big gap of services available for teens who have a parent or parents or somebody in their life who struggles with addiction. And so this is kind of an idea in the making for probably about the last 10 years. So this is something that I've been very passionate about, and hoping that our community would have a program for teens, kind of an extension of the Betty Ford Children's Program, which is amazing.
And I'm interviewing them this next week, so audience, stay tuned.
Yes, probably one of the best highlights of my career. But I really wanted to find something for teens, and usually what I have found for teens is, there's individual therapy, like I mentioned earlier, and there's a lot of programs for teens who struggle with addiction themselves or substance abuse, but there's nothing really for teens whose lives have been impacted by addiction. And
so who might not be trapped by addiction yet,
right?
But they have been impacted.
Yes.
And what does that mean? Because I think sometimes people are like, well, what does that look like? When we say teens that are impacted by addiction, what exactly are we meaning?
So, and I just looked at the statistics just right before we started this Facebook Live, that there are 8 million children in the U.S. Under the age of 18 who are living in homes where there is addiction, so whether parents or older siblings. So obviously it's an epidemic. We have an opiate epidemic, opioid crisis, alcoholism, just drug addiction in general. So 8 million children are suffering, and we can say that a big portion of that are teens. And even thinking about children who are impacted by addiction, they're obviously going to grow into teens, and they're going to hit different developmental stages. And so when a teen is impacted by addiction, they feel the same trauma as children do. They also experience this feeling of being alone, not being able to talk to anyone because there's still that stigma around addiction. There's kind of this, and we talk a lot about this in the family program at Cedar, and I think in other family programs, that there's 3 unspoken rules that happen in families, and that's don't talk, don't trust, and don't feel.
So what do those mean exactly?
So especially for children and teens, it's, we can't talk outside of our home about what's really going on. And there's this dilemma of, one, it seems somewhat normal if this is what this is the environment that you've been raised in. It's like, oh, this is how all families operate. But then in time, you realize, this is traumatizing. I don't think this is how families are supposed to be when there's the chaos and their parent who's not emotionally present, or maybe there's abuse, or maybe there's neglect, or just their emotional needs not being tended to. And I think just not talking, it's not okay to talk outside of our family, because children and teens are also very protective of their parent
and their loved ones.
So and then there's the don't trust. I think kids and teens learn to especially not trust themselves and trust their feelings. They may not even trust their loved one, their parent or older sibling who struggles with addiction, because there's been a lot of broken promises. And then don't feel. It's, a lot of times what's really going on in the home is kind of swept under the rug, and no one's really identifying and talking about the real problem, and they're not able to share how they feel, and it doesn't feel safe to talk about how they feel. And I think kids and teens and family members often walk on eggshells around addiction. So it's like, well, if I come home from school and I have a C on my test, and then I tell my parent, and then they go and drink or use drugs, then somehow it's my fault. And so I think those rules in addicted homes, they kind of happen. Obviously, they're not written somewhere and put, on a wall, but it's kind of understood that we're not going to talk, we're not going to trust, we're not going to feel. And I think as children then develop into teens, I mean, that's a really tough age of trying to identify who you are. You're making friendships, you're trying to figure out your future, you're trying to figure out romantic relationships. Like all of that happens in the teen years. Yeah. And then when, there's some things going on at home for the teen, they have a hard time focusing at school or trusting adults. And so it kind of, I think, has a ripple effect in the teen's life.
And it also, if I'm hearing you right, it's problematic for everyone, right?
Yeah.
Like, something while you were talking about the not feeling, not trusting. I mean, part of that is even with some of the grown-ups, when addiction is in the home, they're maybe not trusting their own experience, or what they may not even be sure themselves what they're feeling. Right? There's like an example I know that we gave at the Betty Ford Children's Program around explaining to parents those rules is this idea that a kid can come up. Oh, I see Chrisita on the live. Hi, Chrisita, and thank you for saying yes. This is such an important conversation.
Oh, wonderful! She says. That's great.
Thank you. We love that feedback, and that a kiddo might come up to a parent and see that the parent is crying, and the kid says, "Hey, are you okay?" Whatever the grown-up's name is, mom or dad or grandma or whoever their grown-up is, and the grown-up says back to them, "Oh, I'm fine." Right? And the kids are incredibly empathetic, and they take in everything, right? Like they observe.
Very in tune to their environment. They know something's off. And teens, so when we did a teen program at Cedar years ago, and I was just amazed that, obviously teens are able to pick up that something's off, but they're so, they're even much more in tuned because, developmentally, they're really in tune to their grown-ups' feelings and
what's going on.
Their friend group is super, super important. So they're, spending times with other friends and their families and thinking, okay, something's...
doesn't seem the same. Something is impacting this family system. And so another thing that came up for me as you were talking is something that Jerry Moe, the founder of the Betty Ford Children's Program, said about one of the worst parts of addiction. In fact, he said the worst part about addiction is the person struggling with the disease is unable to consistently love the people that matter most to them.
Yes.
Right? And like, how heartbreaking is that? And so they may go often, if they get help, right? They go and they might get treatment at an IOP, an inpatient intensive outpatient program, or I was combining words there. Or they might do residential care. They may go see an individual counselor. They may go to AA. They may find their support network in a whole host of opportunities, a whole host of programs, right?
Yes.
And even sometimes their spouse might get some support. Parents of that person trapped by addiction might get support. And one of the major groups that doesn't get support is what you're talking about, this teen population.
Yeah. And I think especially when we think, that if a teen's not acting out or if they're not using drugs themselves, they're not having a hard time at school, then, they're doing okay.
They're showing you they're all right.
Yeah.
That's what people have told me. And I'm like, I don't know about that.
Right.
It means they might be internalizing a lot.
They do internalize a lot. And I think and I hear this in the family program, and I heard this at Betty Ford, and the teens that I have worked with, there is this, is this my fault? Is this something that I've done or I could have done? I think for teens too, that they're often put in a position of having to take care of their siblings. They're older, they might have a driver's license, they might have a job, but there's like this pressure that teens often feel to take care of the home, to drive their siblings around, to, so sometimes they can take the role of a parent.
Because there's just so much going on, right? There's so much chaos in addiction. So one of the things that I think I'd love to hear your response is in my own work with couples, in working in family programs, in talking with other counselors that work with families. One of the things they'll say is, or I've had people trapped by addiction say is, oh, my kids didn't really know because I used when they went to sleep,
right,
or I used when they were away at their friend's house, so they don't really need that support, or they right, they seem to be doing fine, so I don't want them to learn more about this when they didn't really know, which is, there's so much shame and stigma around addiction, right? So from my point of view, that feels like a lot of what is actually is shame that has hijacked the parent, and that's who's talking.
Oh, yeah.
But how do we support the parents and also support the teens in that identifying, like this is hard, and man, there's so much tenderness you have for this kid, and I know that's why it's hard to recognize that this disease might have had an impact on them.
Yeah.
And also get that support for the kids. What would you say?
That's
nothing like a really hard question.
Right. Well, so I think helping the parents and the teen and the family it's kind of separating the disease from the person. So, I think one of the softest spots for a parent is obviously their children. When somebody is struggling with addiction, they're trapped by addiction, they do carry a lot of shame. They do have so much fear that this has devastating, lasting effects for their child or their teen, and for the rest of the family. And so there's so much shame. And to help the parent kind of say, okay, this was my disease, and this is not who I am.
Yeah.
And also helping the kids say, I can love my parent, but I can also not like the disease. I can hold space for both. I love my mom, I love my dad, I love my older sibling, but when they're trapped by their disease, I don't like what it does to them, I don't like what it does to me, I don't like what it does to the family.
Yeah.
And I think the huge thing is to start talking about it.
Yeah. Because shame cannot live in the light, as Brene Brown would say.
Absolutely. Like, start having these conversations, as awkward and triggering and uncomfortable as it is, to actually start having the conversations of, because, and like you said earlier, even if a kid isn't, or a teen isn't watching their parent use, like in the moment, but they see the effect. They see mom or dad sleeping all day. They see them not being able to hold a job, or they see them getting sick. All of those things have an impact.
And not as present. They sense that, right? They sense when their parent is fully present,
right,
and when they're not.
And to be able to, once you're talking about it, then it's like, oh, now I can understand, okay, mom or dad is sick because they have the disease of alcoholism. And then it validates the family, the teen, the child, that their experiences, basically, that they're not crazy.
Yeah.
Like
that it's real.
It's real. Right. So having a conversation is super important.
And it helps the family heal, right? In AA, they say, you're only as sick as your secrets. A family is only as sick as its secrets.
Yeah.
Once that stuff is exposed, there's no more power in it, I can't remember. I had this supervisor that told me about this metaphor, and I wish that I remembered. But it's the name. It comes from Europe, and it's this concept of a two-headed monster that's chasing you, and it's chasing you and chasing you and chasing you, and the moment that you stop. And it's like a snake, and it has a head on each end. But the moment that you it sounds terrifying. It does sound terrible. The moment you stop, it swirls around you, and it feels like it's going to contract. And one head is here, and then the other one swirls the other way, and it sees itself, and it releases you and lets go.
Oh, I like that. I like that.
And it's this idea there is so much fear, right, in this disease.
Absolutely.
That's what actually gives it a lot of power. There's fear that it's going to destroy relationships. There's fear that I'm a bad person because I have this disease. There's fear that I might lose a loved one to this disease. I mean, there's just so much fear. The families, when they come in, are just shrouded in fear.
They're shrouded in fear, and they have tried
heartbreak.
everything to help their loved one get better. And the thing, too, about the families is when one person suffers, everybody is suffering.
Yes.
The children, the teens, the parents, the siblings, everybody who is a part of that unit is suffering. And I really see addiction as a family disease that in order for the family to heal, every person is deserving of recovery.
Yes.
The alcoholic addict is deserving of recovery. The spouse or the parents, the children, the teens, everybody is deserving of recovery because that's how the family heals together.
Yes. It's really thinking about this in terms of a system, of an ecosystem, right? So the family is an ecosystem, and the disease of addiction has polluted the ecosystem, right? It has infiltrated the love and the care that the family has for one another.
Yeah.
And when we look at it and we look at the symptoms, with little kids, they have tummy aches. With teenagers and adults, they may report headaches or not sleeping well, or they have depression, or they have anxiety, or they feel isolated or lonely. And when we ask families, including the person that was impacted by the disease, like directly had the disease, we see that the symptoms have impacted everyone, that everyone is sharing the same symptoms.
It's a parallel process. It is absolutely a parallel process. When the addict or alcoholic is struggling with shame and guilt and depression and hopelessness and fear, the family is experiencing the same thing. Hopelessness, fear, shame, guilt, confusion. Same with the children, same with the teens.
Yes. So your program, and I think we're getting to a point where we're going to be wrapping up. I just want you to reiterate kind of what you plan to offer with your teen program, at least initially. I know you have
big dreams.
Huge dreams.
I know. One thing at a time.
Which is awesome, right? Like, we got to dream big. And I know you're getting a program up and running.
Yes.
So kind of just share a little bit about what that will look like, how people might find out more about it.
Great. So I'm starting with a teen program that's psychoeducation around addiction. It's a group that's going to meet for 7 weeks.
Okay.
It's an hour and a half, and obviously it's for teens who have been impacted by addiction, not necessarily a parent's addiction. I've worked with some teens who've had an older sibling, older brother, older sister, even a close aunt, uncle, grandparent. But it's really designed so teens can feel like that they're not alone. They can feel that camaraderie. They can get some of that community, some of that addiction education, and that it can help them get on the road to their own recovery. My hope is to offer this at least 4 times a year. I have even a bigger goal of offering like a consecutive 4-day program like the Betty Ford Children's. Cool. But for now, so that's what I want to do for the teens. I'm also going to do a family process group for family members. So whether it's parents or a spouse or a child.
Or a cousin or an aunt or a really good friend.
Yeah, because I think families are often overlooked in this process too, because they have experienced trauma. They are in fear.
Yeah.
They need the addiction education and some of the tools on how to care for themselves, which is really, really important.
Exactly. Yeah, that's beautiful. And something that I know that you guys said a lot at Cedar is the improved health of one family member.
Yes, has a profound effect on the rest of the family.
Yes.
I could talk about this for hours.
I know. Well, we can do this in series. We'll do this as part one.
Okay.
We can say more, but we will include in either in the comments, or I'll figure out how I might link this, Kim's website. So you can check that out and learn more about the family program and the teen program. So the family process group, and then also this teen program, which initially is going to be held at the...
So it will be held at the Betty Ford Children's. The teen group will be, because they are very generous in letting me use their space on Monday nights. So
cool.
I just love that program so much, and what they do is amazing, and I'm so grateful that they're just as passionate about serving this population as me. So
that's so cool. So again, clinicians working together on a system issue, right? It's a parallel process, right? When we come together as providers and wellness practitioners, and we collaborate, that helps us then have that more powerful influence on family systems, on community systems, on national systems.
Absolutely.
So I appreciate you coming on. This is
Thank
so
you.
fun.
This is fun.
Go ahead.
I feel like I seriously could talk about this for hours.
Sure.
So thank you. You got me on a roll.
Well, this is great. So yeah, please in the comments, just let us know if you're watching this in the replay. And we would love you to share this, because this, as Cressida said, is such an important conversation. We want more people to know that there are programs out for families, for teens, for kids, that there is this support, because the fact is, as Jerry said, you said 8 million that currently have somebody with addiction in their household. There is also the fact that Jerry says 1 in 3 kiddos will have addiction or substance abuse in their homes at some point in their life. 1 in 3, that's 33% of our kiddos in the U.S., And so it impacts people's lives. It impacts the people trapped by the disease and their loved ones that are supporting them through that process as well. And so we invite you to share this video with everyone, really, if you can, because that's just so many people out there that are needing support, and we really want to destigmatize this topic. And so, Cressida, I appreciate you sharing that you want to help us out, and that's great. Yeah, more people that want to help and share. We invite you, contact Kim if you have questions, or myself if either of us, about family programs or what resources there are out there. And as I mentioned, Kim and I have much love for the Betty Ford Children's Program, and I will be interviewing them next Wednesday. So please stay tuned.
Thank you so much for having me, and I love your office space. I love coming out to Golden. So
thanks, Kim.
Yeah,
this is great. All right, take care.